Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Perceptive podcast here on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. I am Josh Beiser, and we have another indie developer interview lined up today. He is from the studio Twinlake Minstrals, and they are getting ready to release their next game on Steam, as well as talk a little bit more about their studio and background. So, please welcome to the cast, Mireneye. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Josh. Thank you for asking. I do have to add a tiny correction to your presentation, in which we're getting ready to show off the game publicly, so to speak. Get the Steam. Well, by the time this video goes online, we'll have the Steam page and everything that people can go and, call to action, so to speak.
Yep.
But yeah, as for me as a designer developer, I've been wanting to make a game since I was a kid. Never really got into it more than in the modding scene in 2003 or 4 for Morrowind. And then did modding stuff for quite some time. Oh, and I was like always really ambitious. So I was like, I'm gonna make a total conversion, going from knowing nothing to like this total conversion, and that's a bit of a theme with me. Is like I want something to put my teeth into, but as I've grown, I also realize more and more what that means in terms of like what you have, the scope of what you have to learn, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been a journey. In 2012 or 2012 or 13, I jumped on an indie project for a game that was called Salt Mountain. It's supposed to be like a Souls-like combined with Souls-like combined with like Asia, sort of like the 4 great like myths or stories that they have like in their culture and stuff like that. And I did environmental stuff for that project for a while, and same time was learning Unreal Engine. Parallel to that, in 2011, I started writing a pen and paper setting, which in 2014, as I had learned a little bit of Unreal Engine, I started like making it its own game. So was a lot of things going on there at the same time, and that is the game that I'm working on today. So in some ways, I've been working on it since 2011, in terms of lore, story, and everything.
All right. And on your studio site, so you mentioned Dynasthir, which hopefully I didn't butcher that too badly, and Gravity Battler. So which one is which one is like your current project? You kind of working on both at the same time.
Dynasthir is absolutely the main project. Gravity Battler is on there for it's a project that I'm doing in weekends when I need a little bit of a break away from my main thing. So Dynasthir is the one that we're really like putting all the focus in whenever I'm not resting, which I tend to do game dev when I'm resting as well, because I find it so goddamn fascinating and fun. So.
Mm-hmm.
It really doesn't turn into work unless stress comes into the picture, which that happens.
So for people listening to us right now, what's kind of the elevator pitch for Dynasthir?
So the elevator would be Dynasthir is a Dark Ages-inspired third-person action RPG with an obscure world and deadly kinetic combat fueled by adrenaline. So the keywords there is like adrenaline, Dark Ages-inspired, obscure, deadly and kinetic, I guess.
Mm-hmm. So you were saying a few minutes ago that you started work on this like around 2011.
Yes.
Like on and off. What kind of inspired you or Dynasthir to like kind of make that as your main project?
Initial inspiration was Demon Souls into, I guess, 2010 or 2000. Yeah, 2010, I guess, is when I picked up Demon Souls, something like that. didn't know From stuff at all before that point, but picked it up via some of the early streamers and people around who showed it off, like Epic Name Bro and Quailag and some other people. So it's really early on to that, and it was such a beautifully crafted world with deep mysteries that were difficult to untangle from the mystery of what the world creates, and that ultimately inspired me to want to create something of my own. But of course, I've always wanted to create worlds.
And you said a few minutes ago that you're making it in Unreal. And how has it been, I guess, working in Unreal as kind of like your first major project?
It's an incredibly vast tool. There's like a lot of times there's like 4 or 5 ways to do a thing, and if you really get into the programming side aside from the scripting side, there's probably 5 more. So like it's easy to look around for tips and tricks, but there's no coherency to it. So it takes time to learn how to use Unreal Engine properly. That's been my experience, at least, that the information that is out there is not always coherent in terms of best practice. Does that answer your question? I feel I went on a bit of a tangent there.
I think that's good. And I guess as just to elaborate, like for people watching, right now you're also on itch.io. Have you worked on any other game projects, or have you just been focusing on Dynasthir and Gravity Battlers in your spare time?
Yeah, I like to have strong focus points in my life. So Dynasthir being such a big project as well, takes up most of the time. I've meddled in other things. I did like a quick little dirty game jam games 2 years ago, roughly. It's called Tier Pitat, which is a weird like walk in a corridor horror, like on a rails sort of thing with, let's say, a demon as your friend through the darkness. Yeah, it's a weird one. Focus on is story and exploration, and yeah, railroaded horror. But it was meant to have like some good feels in terms of like, I guess, just the voice acting and everything. The characters, I guess, were supposed to be the driving factor in that one.
And it's always tricky when you're trying to like start out in terms of like the scope of your projects like that. And I guess with Dynasthir, with like your interest in playing Demon Souls and kind of going for this like dark fantasy, is what has been like the work you've like put into like what kind of like mechanics, or like how are you approaching the development of it?
Well, initially, uh, initially not knowing anything about game development, I threw a lot of things just at the table and was like, it's going in this direction, it's going in that direction. Then I had ideas for the pen and paper version that was like, try to wrangle it into a game, and things not working for a good while. And eventually from like nailing down the sort of experience that I wanted, in terms of like game pillars, and in terms of like I used to reference a document or like a web page. It's called the 8 Ways of Fun. It's a Mark something, I don't know, Mark LeBlanc, something like that. I don't know. I might be butchering the name entirely, but it's called 8 Ways of Fun, or 8 Types of Fun, rather. And essentially, any game supposedly does well to nail a few of those. And so it's like games as sense pleasure, games as exploration, games as these like an umbrella of like different terms. And I was looking at that after a friend recommended it to me, and then I nailed down like, okay, these are the types of fun that I want people to have, and then revised the game to sort of like, I'm not adhere to in like the strictest sense, but to infuse it with meaning, right? So in terms of, so your question was also in terms of like work, or how that is like transpired after I got some structure, which I would say this came about like 2 or 3 years ago, I would say, where like the structure was starting to solidify a little bit. After that, it's been much easier to like go back and look at that and sort of be like, okay, these things that I was thinking, these are not really part of the experience or have to be reworked in some way. There is a quote. Hold on, I'm gonna just really quickly see if I can grab it here, that I've been using lately. There it is. So I was doing like I was thinking about the studio that I'm wanting to build, and I remembered a quote that people say, "Oh, kill your darlings," and that never quite sat right with me, because like so much of my design is just looking at my darlings and finding ways to work with them or change how they interact with whatever I'm creating. So what I want to do for my studio is to find ideas that I believe in, and stick with them and work alongside those ideas and follow them to the natural conclusion. So in that sense, I don't think I want our studio to kill our darlings. We want to love them to death and bring them back stronger.
And for your studio, are you a sole developer, or do you have other people on your team?
We're two people basically working out of like our passion for the project, and then I occasionally like contract others for specific things that might be necessary along the course of the project. Sound has been one of the primary ones for that purpose.
Mm-hmm. And with Dynasthir, I guess with the kind of design or like how you've been building it up, I guess with this being kind of like your first like major like 3D game, or at least first like full like project title in this regard, how has it been kind of like figuring out, or I guess parsing what you took from like Demon Souls and Souls likes and trying to, I guess, make that your own with this game?
How that was the question, how that experience have been.
Yeah,
Or
like how it's been like trying to put that together, like in your own words in a way.
Yep. Well, the way I've come to see it, at least, is that the game sort of is directly an expression of things that I enjoy in games. And Demon Souls was like the initial root of that. And as I've moved more and more and worked more and more on the project, I realize how much other things that are like inside of myself, of things that I like, anything from Twin Peaks Lynchian shit to Morrowind, right? Those are two huge inspirations for me. So then it's been a journey of merging those inspirations alongside the DNA that I identify as being a Souls-like DNA. That to me is incredibly fun, right? That's part of the core of the fun, I think, in the game design, that challenges we have ahead of ourselves. So I've thoroughly enjoyed that process. Um,
Mm.
hmm.
And I guess like with building like from an action perspective, because one of the things I've been doing lately with writing my book on like RPG design has been looking at kind of translating real time or like reflex based gameplay with these systems. How has it been, or like in terms of the combat or how you're building that layer? How is that working for you with the game?
Initially, when I was doing all on my own, uh, I I don't have, well, let's say it like this. I haven't trained my eye to see like a difference from like, oh, this swing to that swing necessarily, right? If I'm looking at animations. So I'm really lucky that eventually my partner came along because he's got like an acute eye for the differences of like this swing and that swing is like, and understands how those sort of things link together. So it's been imperative for the feel of combat that he like came along to see those differences more acutely than I can like intuit, so to speak. So I was on a path of learning that on my own, and I've become better at it since the early days of like trying to figure out the balance of like the animations, the speed of combat, the pacing between you and the enemies, and the challenges that they provide early and mid slash late game. So it's been a journey, continues to be one, and I feel that it's maybe perhaps one of the most powerful things have been to be able to bounce the ideas with someone. As I was just working on it on my own, it's like I'm working alone in secret. Well, this should be good. It feels good. It did not. It wasn't good. It was not. It was pretty fucking trash. So I have some really silly videos from early prototypes. Where it's like, yeah.
That's actually a good segue into this next question. Like with the game being in development for so long, one of the things that I often like hear from the developers with projects that like dying into multiple years is how things have changed or shifted from early to mid to late in development. With Dynasthir, I guess how has the game at all like fundamentally changed from like your original concept to where it is now?
The Some of the biggest shifts that we realized alongside the development is that the original drafts, that when it was still like a pen and paper role playing base, was that you would start your journey in Dynasthir from like any of the like main locations, the towns or whatever, and then your journey would just like sort of sprawl from there. Uh, and at some point in development, we just realized like that there were so many difficulties with like game balancing, because like suddenly they're like, if you don't have like something that is set out to be a starting area,
Mhm.
and you want any area to be the starting area, suddenly you might have to work with scaling, or you can just say fuck it, and it's sometimes a real difficult game, sometimes a cakewalk. It's like, and then you have to design alongside those paths. And I realized that's not something I wanted to do. I realized that I wanted to be able to sit down, take an area, and be like, this is a starting area. This is a starting experience. Even though the game opens up very fast to show you lots of the world, uh, the the benefit of the control of like showing people, uh, showing and not guiding them as much as, yeah, as showing them like this tiniest poke that comes from both sound and light and characters and everything, the tiniest poke of like, this is a direction, and that was like really helpful for that. Yeah, it's one of the
Mhm.
biggest changes that like, um also big change was realizing that the map was too small in 2016. It's like I would like No. The map has to be like some measure bigger because I wanted people to get the feeling of being lost. And there was a little bit, it needed to be a little bit bigger to accommodate that feeling. Since then, that design has also bitten me in the ass quite a lot because sometimes there's like a large, vast distance between two areas, and it has to be populated with meaningful content. And I pride myself on saying that Dynasthir doesn't use a lot of procedural tools. Of course, we have like the foliage placement where like things get jotted down, and then that's like semi-random in by itself. But we use very few procedural tools, so it is in some sense maybe one of the few like open worlds released today that are like very handcrafted. So it takes time and real attention to the level design and everything, but it is very rewarding to see people explore the world.
And in terms of kind of like exploration and kind of like what you're doing in the game, besides obviously combat being focused on that, what else, I guess, like, do you have planned, or what is in the game that people can do and explore with?
Right. So the general loop of things really is about having like a starting point wherever that might be in the world for now, and then preparing to go like outside of the town, which the outside is always more dangerous than like these settlements or whatever. So you prepare, you go out there, you tussle with the world for a little bit as you're trying to both understand it and you're trying to get somewhere. And then there's like this shorter loop of like you can gain some resources while you're out there, and then like sort of like keep pushing while you're out there. But eventually, you always loop back to those settlements, right? To do like your actual preparations, your actual talking with people, and seeing what things might be different. So, in terms of those gameplay parts, it's a lot about this preparation before you're like heading out. A lot of it is the attentiveness to subtle things that change in the world because of things you've done, which is a big thing. I try to emphasize that your subtle movements in the world, what you're doing, uh, changes the world in subtle ways, and sometimes completely silly ways too. Yeah,
And I guess
we want lots of small interactions like that.
it's about kind of like going out, interacting, and stuff like that. Do you have, or like, have you done any work in terms of like equipment or gear, or like how are you approaching that with the game?
Yeah, I think I see that as like an imperative part of exploration is to have meaningful loot, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like it was really important that we didn't have like some random flag that just pops on achievement somewhere. Nothing against achievements, but if it doesn't have like an intrinsic meaning inside of the game for like something your character has for its growth, or something that changes the world or gives you a further I struggle to call them quests because it feels like a bit of a like it feels a bit like a candy wrapper word, but essentially quests, right? Tasks or whatever missions. So something that furthers the world in some way. So as for equipment, you'll be finding different weapons, different armors, lots of different things that can help you in your journey. Buffs. Yeah.
And is the gear in the game procedurally generated, or are you hand making them?
No, like everything about that is handmade. Um, we wanted like everything to be very like tailored to the experience we want to craft, so to speak. There is an element that isn't procedural, but we wanted to tackle the idea of when you pick up a duplicate item, right? Like you have one sword and you happen to come upon the same sword. It's sort of like a boring thing, right? Because like, oh, you just get an extra in the inventory. So at one point we wanted to tackle that, and I don't want to spoil the experience of finding this out, but there's a mechanic that makes this a little bit more fun, I think.
And I guess one thing we haven't talked about yet are kind of like the enemies or encounter design. Obviously with the inspiration from Demon Souls and Souls like that kind of gives you a really good foundation. But what has been like your experience or thoughts on designing like enemy encounters or fights?
In terms of designing enemies and different encounters, let's start it in the end of an idea that I had that fascinated me for a long time, and that is the idea that the world sort of moves even if the player is not around. So you have a lot of open worlds where it's basically like a timer, 40 seconds, 60 seconds. You walk a certain distance and there's some event that spawns close to the player, and it's because the player is there. So for Dynasthir, we wanted to have like these different routes that basically a lot of enemies walk around on and sort of interact with each other. And one of them might be a demon, one of them might be like a soldier or whatever. And sometimes you come upon these things. I have an anecdote about that where we had a like a sort of like a health potion. They have a name in the game, but I'll let all that be revealed once people get to play it. But it's sort of like a health potion, and by physics, they had kicked it down. So it rolled down a hill. And I looked at that and I was like, I didn't see any enemies nearby. So I looked at that and I'm like, okay, weird. And I walked up to it, picked it up, and then like an assassin decided to like stab me basically in the back. Not a backstab, but he decided to stab me regardless. And I was like, that felt like he planted that health potion there to like lure me, right? And we're still finding the balance in these things. That sort of occasion is rare, but it does happen, and that's something I want to capitalize on in terms of encounters. In addition to that, we have something called an encounter system, which is essentially it allows me as a designer to go in and say, oh, on this point from this ledge, we have this X encounter that can happen. So maybe an assassin jumping down. It could be a number of different events as well. So I have these different points, spawn points in the world. Player will like walk and get close to them, and things will trigger based around different parameters in the world. So with that in mind, I could go in as a designer and be like, I want this specific experience, but then also let the world sort of like fill that in when either it's time or by chance, etc., etc. So it allows the world to be both dynamic and have some sense of design to it.
And I guess in terms of difficulty, with like everything that you're thinking about, I guess what kind of like skill level are you aiming for with Dynasthir?
I would say that the skill ceiling can be quite high. However, I'm not being the most brutal designer, I wouldn't say. People who have played it have all been very capable enough to get through it all, because of the nature also of RPGs is that you can sort of level up, right? You can always get another skill point, grind it out. However, I don't want people to necessarily grind that much. I want sort of a smooth progression for people. So that's always the challenge. Yeah.
And it's always tricky when you're trying to balance everything together. And as you were saying earlier, in terms of the scale and how you had to improve or grow the game space out, what kind of length are you thinking about in terms of people going through this game from start to finish?
Tricky question. We had an internal demo on our Discord, and we had one person play for 17 hours, and that's that feels immense. That feels like the demo is not that long. but obviously people can spend that time with the game. This guy in particular, he chose to do a bunch of short ass speed runs, a few every day, and try to get all their achievements and everything. It's a bit tough to say. I think if you're following the breadcrumbs along where the story is taking you, I don't think the game is going to take longer than 25 hours, 20 hours to finish, something like that. However, there will be things for you that will distract you along the way. I've seen one person so far play it in a very straight manner from the start to finish. Like the demo, that is, not the full thing.
All right. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else in terms of design that we didn't touch on. I guess in terms of environmental design, I think this is another interesting topic. We've seen games go for all kinds of approaches when it comes to building out their worlds. We've seen some that, again, tend to focus on very wide but very plain levels. You, of course, have stuff like Dark Souls and Elden Ring, where you have kind of the fixed areas that are their own, quasi little stage. With Dynasthir, as you said, with everything being handmade, what has been kind of I guess, level design wise? What have you been building for it in terms of building out obstacles or that kind of flow?
Let's say it in this way, because I don't want to say too much. I've always enjoyed when the game lets me experiment and find my way. Right? So I wanted to design with that in mind. So there's been lots of challenges in terms of how do you reasonably limit where the player can get at any one point without making it feeling artificial, right? So it's yeah, we can have a few giant death pits, but at some point it's yeah, now it's starting to feel artificial. And then you keep thinking, okay, so this mountain is clearly too steep, right? And you can have that for a little bit, and then that also can start feeling stale a little bit. So then you start thinking about other things can I have a brush of forest that is just too thick to walk through? Stuff like that. And the ideas keep growing over a few years, and you try to use those tools to your best ability to give some sense of the world allows a lot, but still sort of maintains a play space that doesn't completely untangle the fabric of that world, as usually happens when people break outside of maps.
And I have to ask, with Dynasthir, is it going to be a single player only game? Have you thought anything about multiplayer, or is that definitely beyond the scope for this project?
That's beyond scope. We played with the idea of strange asynchronicities, but they never really came to anything Unreal Engine is a little bit strange if you want to have one player be one thing and another player be something else. Usually it easily allows you to set up like call upon. I don't want to get too technical, but like easily allows you to set up like something that is shared over the network. But the moment you want to like have one player be something else, control something else, it's a little bit trickier. But we play with some ideas, but it's absolutely out of scope for this project.
So I guess before we kind of talk a little bit more about kind of like where you're at with the project and kind of what's coming either relatively soon or soon by the time this cast goes up, anything else from a design standpoint that we didn't touch on that you would like to bring up?
To some degree, we didn't really touch much on sound or AI for that matter. I guess we touched a little bit on AI when talking about the world and how things move around and stuff. Those are the two ones that come to mind immediately. And then, of course, there's also story structure and quest design, stuff like that. So take your pick if you want. If you have any immediate questions in mind.
I guess enemy AI could be an interesting one. Like, how are you approaching, I guess, like, how nasty the enemies will be, or, you know, how passive they will be against the player?
We're using a system to design. We're using a system that I didn't design from the ground up, that like I got from somewhere. And that didn't really have like an aggression meter to start with or something like that. It's usually there's lots of parameters. It's about like at least in this system, there's lots of parameters for like what types of attack it has, and then of course the animation decides essentially how that is, and then the distance from the player sort of like dictates that a lot, or other things. One thing I know I didn't want was input reading, so that was important to me, that like they don't know what the player is doing, right? But they can still sort of like make some sort of judgment based on other parameters. But as for aggression, that was a thing for a while where everything felt a little bit samey. But a lot of it is just like if a character moves more slowly, again comes back to animation and character speed. If it moves more slowly, it is also perceived as being less aggressive. And if you combine that with the attack animation being slow and taking time to reset, then that is going to be perceived again as less aggressive. So that's really what we worked on mostly, is the animations in that regard to work with that, and of course the character speed, like I said. We have at least one particular enemy that where I wanted it to be absolutely relentless. So like where other ones would have different states where it would like start strafing, or another state where it would like back away or something like that, or dodge away. It is basically just in your face all the time and always trying to attack you. Because like I want that like immediately like relentless feeling. So there's some variety in there. That's the most custom AI that I made, is one that I just needed it to be Doom level aggressive.
And for people watching, then, in terms of the story, like, what is kind of the general plot or what you've been writing about it?
The way that I've told this before is that you as a player, you sort of find yourself at the very edge of your lifespan, so to speak. And you get sort of a calling. Something calls out to you, and that changes your, not fate, that changes your direction, your vector, the direction you're heading in. And then as you sort of start the game, not knowing what to do or really where you are, picking up from your devastated self, so to speak, and finding your way into the world and trying to make sense of it. Like I said earlier, like a lot of Dynasthir is about exploration, and I've always, even since early design, seen it as this is an encounter with a dying world. So that's where the tagline of the game comes in. The world is dying, will you persist? So it's important. I'd say it's imperative in the game that you're sort of making a record. You're experiencing a dying world.
All right. I think that's kind of like all like the design or development questions I have for right now. So I think with that, let's talk a little bit about kind of like what's coming or what can people be expecting in the near future. So for everyone watching this right now, we are recording this right at the beginning of May of 2023. So, oh, I'm sorry, March. Sorry, time is irrelevant when it comes to game dev, as we all know.
Time is convoluted.
Yes. But we're recording this at the beginning of March. So, for people watching us right now, what are kind of like your plans for Dynasthir in the coming weeks or even coming months?
By the time when this video comes online, the plan is that there should be a Steam page where you can wishlist Dynasthir. In terms of in terms of the near future, we are trying to just secure ourselves that we can really develop in relative peace for the next God knows how long. I'm not going to reveal any time exactly yet, but the demo that we've held is chapter 0. And depending on how you see it, it's either 4 or 5 chapters. Chapter 0 is taking us a long time, but mechanically it's because we had a lot of systems, we had a lot of things that needed to be done and needed to be worked in really good working order. So this testing period helped us nail that. So really, right now it's all about making assets, and just like implementing them, and like getting all of the characters in there, getting all of the story like written down. Well, a lot of it is written, but it has to be put into the game. And like just actualizing the content. So we expect that to move much faster. Yeah, but I can't say things closer than that currently in terms of release date or something like that.
All right. So with the demo being like the planned chapter 0, how long like do you estimate it will take for someone to go through it?
Man, I've seen speed runs for like 16 minutes. Uh, but for a regular playthrough, I'd say it's of like maybe 3 hours, 4. Because you can fuck around a lot until you find out where you're supposed to be going and having a good time doing it.
With kind of playtesting, how has been kind of the response, and like how have you like kind of managed, what people say, good, bad, or otherwise about the game?
I would say it's been overwhelmingly positive. The response to everything, people have thoroughly enjoyed the world design, which is something I it crawls under my skin because I'm like, is it good enough? Like I look at like other games and I'm like, that's so fucking pretty, right? And I think we nailed an aesthetic with Dynasthir that works on its own, and it stands out a little bit. It's not atypical, even though it's clearly Dark Ages inspired in a lot of ways, but it's also a little bit abstract-y almost. And people have really enjoyed exploring, which is, one of the key parts of the game. We had, of course, like people reporting, strange hardware or superiorly outdated laptops trying to play the game and just trying to scramble and make the best of that experience somehow. So generally, the feedback that we've gotten has been nothing that we couldn't patch in like a few days, essentially. There's been a few long-standing issues in general with the game, but those are things we know about. Things like, oh yeah, this cloth physics things always crashes when you shoot the character with a bow, or like it's silly, like weird things that just interact with each other in weird ways. But we're tracking them down, and shutting them down.
As you were saying earlier, by the time this goes up, which will probably be from our recording, like a few weeks, that you're hoping to have the store page up. Do you have any estimate for like a release date for Dynasthir, or is that still kind of too far out?
Like I said earlier, we're having finished, essentially finished chapter 0. We have, depending on how you look at it, 4 or 5 chapters that we need to finish after this. And I can't really say closer, like I can't nail down closer than that, but we believe in like a premium model. We don't want to show too much of the world before like you get to really put your teeth into it. So we're not really looking at any early access plans or anything like that. We want people to get in there, get the experience, and have the mysteries intact, right? Have that sense of it. And that's one of the reasons why I kept things secret for so long, for like not talking to many people at all about it, is I want to take this world that I've been brewing in this kettle and be like, here, taste it.
So with that, I think we will wrap things up for this discussion. So, for you, Mireneye, I guess the first question we already mentioned, of course, that it's still very far out in terms of a finished release for Dynasthir. But as we said, in terms of the store page going up, is there an estimate for when is the demo going to come with the store page, or is the demo going to come after the store page?
The plan is to have a basically a bunch of streamers, a bunch of like other people play it and show it off to people for the demo that we have. We are undecided if the chapter 0 is going to be something you can access from the store page. I'm leaning on no, because I want that to be a fresh experience for people as much as possible. We also obviously need to get marketing going. So it's a fine balance of like trying to figure that out. Word by mouth is good. Absolutely. So there's lots of venues, and all I can say is that I'll promise to update people when we know closer exactly which route we are going.
All right.
Building a game, as listeners here will know, or at least understand, is like there's almost infinite facets to it, and anything along the way can go any which direction, and you have to like sort of like rein in all of that somehow. Fun, fascinating, and a bit scary.
Yep. See anything else in terms of logistics? Obviously you're aiming for this to be on Steam, and I'm going to assume on itch as well. Do you have any plans for any other platforms as of right now?
Like in the back of my head, without having like a setup for it, I want to put it on GOG as well. As for consoles, I would love to bring it to consoles, but optimizing for a console that's another thing entirely as well.
Oh yes.
Yeah, so we are looking at bringing it at least a 30 FPS experience on the Steam Deck. Our initial tests show that it's quite promising. Don't know if we can do more for that currently, at least. Optimization is definitely one of those things where, like, if you're a small team, optimization can be really difficult. And again, we want to simulate a lot of the world, so there's a lot of things we just can't. Like, we have to load lots of the map because otherwise we don't have nav mesh for that part of the world or collision, so characters just fall through. So there's lots of small things like simulating proxies in the background and running things and tricks. But doing my best to optimize so that it'll run well on things. That's a bit of a side note, though. I'd love to bring it to consoles in general, the current gen consoles. That would be like PS5 or Xbox. I don't mind for any specific console war, really. I don't know. I highly doubt it would run on a Switch, but yeah, I've seen third party developers who take up like very complex games and make them run on questionable hardware. So like, yeah, like is it the Witcher port for Switch?
I think so.
Yeah, something like that. So like that's impressive, like seriously impressive. So we're just looking for the opportunities. If they come to us, I want to continue supporting this game for a good time. This world is equivalent to me in so many ways that like I poured very much myself into every aspect of it. So supporting it is almost equivalent to supporting myself. So I wanna keep doing that.
With that said, before we kind of go over like social media and places to find you, do you have anything you would like to say to the fans, to your playtesters, to just anyone to kind of wrap up the cast with?
For our playtesters who have tested the game and spent hours, like that's magical. If one person played the game and enjoyed it, that is fantastic. Now we've had at least maybe 50 people play it and enjoy it. Like not specifically for this demo, but like earlier as well, combined together. And it's getting to that point where I have this video I keep coming back to. I got to backtrack my thought here a bit. I have a video I keep coming back to. It's called The World of Wonders, and it's from Final Fantasy 15, and it's just environmental showcase of Final Fantasy 15. And the music and the world combined in that video almost makes me cry every time. So that's what's designing Dynasthir. Not taking so much inspiration from the world, but like looking at that trailer and the impact that has on me. I was playing that music in the back of like just walking through my world, and I almost cried as well. I was like, yeah, this is fucking awesome. And I am so happy that I'm soon able to like show this to people and then looking at people and seeing their reaction to it and like fucking brings tears to my eyes. It's so cool. And having people test that experience and not test, having people take part in that journey and experience is like so meaningful, touches deeply. So I thank them deeply for that. As for other people listening, I can't wait until you get to try it on your own. Like seriously, if it was down to my my feelings of spontaneity, I would fucking push the button and get the demo to everyone now, right? But the thing about keeping a secret and for others' sakes is that it's going to be so much more powerful. And I hope you trust me with that.
Right. So, with that, Miren, it was great hanging out with you tonight. Best of luck with Dynasthir. So, in terms of social media, link backs, places people can find you, all that stuff, if you have places people can follow you, definitely feel free to mention them.
So we have been in like a media sort of dark period, right, for a very long time. We are going to start posting more things. So one of the places the most active place to go to would be our community Discord, which is the Twinlake Minstrals Discord. I'm sure it can be linked somewhere. And right now we're just inviting people over, having a good time and building the community over there. And I'm going to be, a little bit later at least, start showing development things along the way on my Twitter. There is also a Patreon if you are listening and you're like, this sounds amazing and I want to support that, like with some money. I can't express, like, it's an incredibly small Patreon currently, but I can't express how important just, like, it's silly, but like going out and like buying a package of coffee, like it's like, yeah, I have coffee. I can make the world.
Know that feeling.
Yeah, so like, and I'm very, we're on our studio, we're being very, very transparent with everything. So like, one time, I posted to the Patreon, I was like, hey, I am going to take some of this money. I'm going to buy a game for myself because I need some inspiration. I need some to get my mind off things. So like, it might sound like a silly thing because like, how am I supporting this game dev by he's buying another game that he's sitting down and playing? But no, like, it gives me peace of mind to then sit down and do the thing that matters for like us in the movie development, right? So like, if you wanted to support that crazy venture, then we have the Patreon, which is technically my personal Patreon. It's unaffiliated with the company, but of course it all comes back around somehow. Yeah, those are the things that are important right now. And like I said, there will be a link to the Steam page, itch page as well. I wasn't actually considering itch until today because the other Josh said, you gotta be itch. And then it's like, it's so simple to set up. And I'm like, oh, okay.
So. All right. Well, I think with that, we will say goodnight. And Miren, best of luck with Dynasthir. And when it's getting closer to the demo being out, I would love to check it out and show it off on one of my indie showcases.
That would be absolutely lovely. Like I said, we're going to have people showing it off as soon as we have those things sorted when this thing goes up. So you're welcome to tag along on that journey as well. Backtrack a little bit. You told me, like, thank you. I just want to extend that to you as well. Thank you for this opportunity. It's been lovely talking to you.
It was a pleasure hanging out with you. And as I always say to the developers again, definitely best of luck. And hopefully you are nearing at least seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, or seeing almost the tape of the finish line coming up in the future.
2 months ago, I couldn't see the peak of the mountain in the distance. Today I can.
All right. So, for everyone watching, thank you for tuning in as well. Of course, do liking, subscribing, bell ringing, all that YouTuber-based stuff. You'll find links to my information up there as well as down below. Be sure to visit our Discord and the Patreon to support me. If you are a developer working on an upcoming game, if you just want to talk game dev or anything else relating to game development, I'm always looking for a guest for future podcasts. So please reach out any which way. You'll find links to all Mireneye stuff down in the description as well. So be sure to give them a check. So with that said, we're going to end things here. As always, thank you for tuning in, and come back for daily discussions on game design here and on Game Wisdom, where some of the art and science of games. Till next time, take care.